Why did Russia sell Alaska to America? In March 1867, Russia sold Alaska to the USA for $7 million, which comes to about $125 million in today's money. America was only too happy to pick up the sparsely populated Northern Territory due to its abundance of natural resources and sheer size. However, the question is often asked, why America? Why didn't Russia sell Alaska to Canada or the UK? The answer to the Canada question is simple. At the time, Canada wasn't yet an independent country. In early 1867, it was still under British rule, even though in July that year it officially became a self-governing nation. As for selling Alaska to Great Britain, it was out of the question. At the time, Russia and the UK were fierce rivals. Only 10 years earlier, the two nations had fought each other bitterly in the Crimean War. Britain and France had strongly opposed Russian pressure on Turkey due to the Allied nations' reliance on Turkey's access to Asian markets. The war lasted almost 4 years, which resulted in Russia being comprehensively defeated by Britain and France. Russia lost over 500,000 men, and its economy was devastated. With the scars of the Crimean conflict still very raw only a decade later, it was unthinkable for Russia to offer Alaska to the United Kingdom. If Britain was to own Alaska, then they would only be 90 kilometers away from mainland Russia. Hardly a comforting thought. Canada and Britain were clearly not options, so Russia looked at negotiating with the United States. But firstly, how did Russia get hold of Alaska in the first place? Alaska was originally inhabited thousands of years ago by travelers from Asia. It is widely assumed they either crossed the 90-kilometer Bering Strait from Siberia or made their way up from Russian shores by boat. By the 17th century, European settlers were taking more than a passing interest in the Alaskan region. Russia first established small settlements in the 1600s, and Spain sent fleets to set up bases on the Alaskan west coast. Russia was primarily interested in Alaska for its seal furs and hunting and fishing opportunities. In 1799, Alaska was officially declared to be part of Russian America. However, despite setting up settlements mainly in the southeast, Russia was never able to fully colonize Alaska. At its peak, there were only around 800 to 1,000 Russian settlers living here. This was due to the distance from the motherland and the often trying conditions. Northern Alaska was too cold and barren for proper agriculture, which left the sea otter skins as the main product worth trading. Alaska was jokingly referred to as Siberia's Siberia. The capital, St. Petersburg, was literally half a world away. Communication was difficult, and ration and supply shipments from Russia to the settlements only occurred every 2 to 3 years, leaving many people to abandon their posts and return home. The otter seal population was seriously starting to decline, and the future of the fur trade was looking bleak. Then came the Crimean War. Russia was simply outclassed on the battlefield and on the home front. Britain and France were far more advanced in terms of military capability and basic infrastructure, which allowed for the smooth flow of troops and supplies. Factories in Britain and France were able to produce weapons more quickly, and food and materials were always available. Russia struggled. The Crimean War was a massive wake-up call for Russia. A major overhaul was needed across society as a whole. Better roads, hospitals, and schools were required. They had to break away from the serf system that contributed to a huge number of undereducated and unskilled people, draining their resources. To fix things would cost money. Alaska was suddenly seeming to be too much trouble to bother with, and any interested buyers were being seriously considered. Britain was out, and Canada, not yet ready to absorb such a huge mass of land. Enter the United States. In the 1840s, Secretary of State William Seward began pushing for the expansion of American territories to the north. America had just fought a war with Mexico and acquired California, and they had annexed Texas. The Californian gold rush had sent huge numbers of people to the west coast, and Oregon was subsequently settled. Secretary Seward envisioned America's population to be continually growing, and he was convinced that only by acquiring more territory could the US fully achieve its growth potential. Alaska was appealing for several reasons. Britain was a very real threat to try and acquire the land, especially after their defeat of Russia in the Crimean War. Although Britain was basically an American ally, the US was also in economic competition with the UK. America was now looking to expand its Pacific trade routes with China and Japan, so the acquisition of Alaska could be an excellent addition. Alaska was known to be rich in natural resources. At the very least, America knew Alaska had gold, fur, and a huge supply of marine life. These were to be later dwarfed by far more lucrative resources. But more on that later. Perhaps the main driving force behind America's need for Alaska was the concept of manifest destiny. This was a view held at the time that it was America's God-given role to spread the greatness of capitalism and democracy across all of North America. Secretary Seward certainly agreed with this outlook. He entered into negotiations with Russia and discussed terms and prices. Russia was ready to sell. However, the American Civil War put a brake on proceedings. However, in 1867, the time was right, and Seward began negotiations with the Russian minister to the US, Eduard Distokl. The sum of $7 million was decided upon, and the United States had themselves a new territory, over twice the size of Texas. Initially, there were many who mocked the purchase, decrying Alaska as a barren wasteland that not even the Russians wanted. This was soon silenced by the discovery of gold in the Klondike River in 1896, sparking another gold rush. Alaska's fishing industry was developed, and mining for raw resources began in earnest. In 1949, it became America's 49th state, joined soon after by Hawaii. 2 states that were acquired as a result of the United States' grand expansionist plans. Did America get a good deal? The answer is a resounding yes. The acquisition of Alaska has proven to be one of the shrewdest land deals in modern history. Today, over a quarter of America's oil comes from Alaska, and more than half of its seafood. Over the years, the state has produced hundreds of billions of dollars in its production of raw materials and natural resources. Oil, coal, natural gas, copper, timber, lead, gold, platinum, and fish. The list goes on. It's widely believed that Alaska still has billions of barrels of oil reserves yet to be tapped. Yes, billions. In terms of per capita income, it's the 4th richest state in the United States. Pretty good going for an unwanted mass of land not so long ago. The name Alaska comes from the Aleut word Aliska, which means great land. Great land? America certainly thinks so.